Good morning. Good morning. That's actually usually I say good morning, and then I pretend that you didn't say it loudly enough, but that wasn't bad, actually. So you all are, we'll do it one more time anyway, just because I'm used to doing it. Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. That's awesome. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Patrick Mullane. I am the Executive Director of HBS Online and HBS Executive Education. My name, some people were asking me last night about my name and spelling. It's in the bottom right of that slide right there. Excited to have you all here. I know many of you from several years of doing this. It's our favorite time of year in HBS Online. I was just telling somebody that we know many of you as email addresses, social media posts, sometimes support tickets when we don't do something right. So to meet you face to face is just a wonderful, wonderful experience. At the reception last night, it was great to talk to many of you and hear about what you're doing in your lives. And we thank you very much for making us a part of it in your kind of academic journey and in your professional journey. So I always do this every year, and we're going to do it again. We're going to do a selfie together. And I will tweet it out to that hashtag there later so you can get the picture, okay? So I'm going to do a left, center, and right. Are we ready to go? All right. I always look horrible in these things because the camera adds like 20 pounds. All right, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Wait, I should probably do it this way. 1, 2, 3, click. All right, center. 1, 2, 3, click. And right. 1, 2, 3, click. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. You all look fabulous. Okay. So let me do a quick introduction about what's happening today and about Connext, and then I'm going to be introducing our morning keynote. So let's talk about this event. We have 2,700 attendees, roughly, about 500 of you here, another 21 to 2,200 virtually, 117 countries represented, which is pretty awesome. Anybody know how many countries there are in the world? Just shout it out if you know. 195. 195, very good. Was that you who said that? Yeah. Nice job. I just learned this recently. I don't know why, but it's an interesting stat. So we've got some work to do when it comes to reaching the rest of the world. When it comes to continents, though, we've done a pretty good job. Unless we can find like a research scientist in some sort of one of those geodetic bubbles down in Antarctica who's looking to learn accounting or finance, we may not crack that nut anytime soon. But we're doing well. And actually, to get a sense of where people are from, if you don't mind, I'm going to call out a continent. And if you currently live on that continent, so not where you're from, because you may have been born in India, live in the US. If you're living in the US, you're in North America, in case you weren't aware, okay? So clap when I note the continent that you currently reside in, okay? North America. Okay, nicely done. South America. Okay, your colleagues from South America were a little slow on the uptake there. They want to say, is anybody else here from South America? Okay, don't clap, yeah. All right, Europe. Nice. What's next? We'll go Asia. Nice. Africa. I just came from Africa last week, and you guys are on brand. That was awesome. What's next? Australia and Oceania. Hey! Stand up! Awesome. Did I forget any continents?
Central America.
Oh, Central America. That's not a continent, is it? I got people requested, we'll go with isthmuses and islands and Central America. It does beg the question if you go north or south on that one. I'm not sure how you handle that. Okay. Awesome. So welcome. It's great to have all of you here. It's such a diverse audience, and that's what makes this so much fun. I wanted to mention that since last year, we have a new community platform which has a lot of features that I'd encourage you all to check out. We have 34 geography-based chapters and 1 topic-based chapter on innovation and entrepreneurship. If you're interested in new business ideas, new technologies, strategies in a modern world, those sorts of things, I'd encourage you to consider signing up for this chapter to meet like-minded individuals. New features include chapter discussion boards, one-on-one direct messaging, badges for engagement, and more robust profiles. Profiles are only robust, though, if you fill them out. So if you have the opportunity to make your profile very complete, on the platform, that would be helpful. It makes it easier for you to find people that you can connect with and vice versa as well. And if you're interested in joining a community, our community members, excuse me, our chapter leaders, community leaders, they have like a, Lauren, is it like a different colored stripe on the bottom of the badge, I believe? So, what is it? A red stripe. Red stripe on the bottom of the badge means they're a chapter or community leader. You can talk to them, and you can also visit hbsonlinecommunity.org. All right, let's talk about the really fun part of this event for us, is that every year, now for 5 years, we at Connext have launched a community challenge whereby members of this brain trust, this broader community from chapters around the world, effectively compete to help a nonprofit solve an operational or strategic problem. And later we'll talk more about this, but it's been a wonderful experience for us, I think a wonderful experience for many of you. And the nonprofits we've helped have been effusive when it comes to complimenting us being the community, about how much we've helped. So we really appreciate that. This year we're going to be working with the Botswana Initiative of World Education, Inc. That one does not roll off the tongue. I have a hard time saying that one. Its mission is to improve the lives of vulnerable children affected by HIV, AIDS, and poverty in Africa. So really great cause. And we had 5 chapters vie to solve some problems and help with strategies for the organization. We have 3 finalists. For the first time ever, we're going to have a pitch competition at the end of the day today with the 3 finalists. And there will be a panel of judges to pick, including somebody from Botswana who's going to help decide who's going to help them. But we also are going to have an audience favorite. So all of you will get the opportunity to vote on who you think gave the best pitch and has the best opportunity to help Botswana. And I've heard there may be some trophies involved, so that could be exciting. And I guess I'm even going to get an envelope, I hear, and going to get to announce who the winner is, where I get to open an envelope and all that. So a dream of mine. I'll never make it to the Oscars, but that'll be as close as I get. Coming to close here, 2 new courses, Launching Tech Ventures and Leadership Ethics and Corporate Accountability. Keep an eye out for these. Highly encourage you to consider them. They're pretty self-explanatory, I think, with respect to what they cover. So if you have any questions about them, talk to the team. We'll be happy to answer them. Okay, I think that is my last slide. Is there anything I'm forgetting to do, Lauren, before we go, other than introduce Linda? So I'm going to introduce Linda Hill, who is our opening speaker today. And I'm going to do that from behind the podium because I have some notes to read. So first of all, before I read Linda's bio, I want to mention something that's at least interesting to me. So 25 years ago, this August, I think, I arrived on campus to join the MBA program, and Linda was my section chair. What that means is when you go into the classrooms today later for your case discussions, you're in a room with 90 people, and your first year of the MBA program here, the same 90 people sitting in the same room through the whole first year, and the faculty come in and out to you. So you get to know those 90 people very well. Each of those groups of 90 people are called a section. They're labeled Section A, Section B, Section C, so on. Linda was our section chair, meaning the faculty member who was kind of in charge of us as students in Section B in the class of 1999. So this is kind of cool for me. It's kind of a full circle thing to be able to introduce her here. So with that informal introduction, let me give a more formal one. So the theme of our event this year is Future Forward Business, Exploring What's Next. And Dr. Linda Hill is a great person to add some color to that topic this morning. She is the Wallace Brett Donham Professor of Business Administration at HBS and is regarded as one of the top experts in leadership and innovation. She was named by Thinkers 50 as one of the top 10 management thinkers in the world in 2013 and 2021, and received the Thinkers 50 Innovation Award in 2015. She is the co-author of Collective Genius, The Art and Practice of Leading Innovation, co-founder of Paradox Strategies as well. Her current research focuses on scaling innovation and digital leadership. Please join me in welcoming Linda to the stage.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you left something here for me? Okay. Now, do you want me to tell you if he was a good student or not? Yeah, you can make your own guess about that one, right? So it really is an honor to be here with all of you, and just to thank you very much for the invitation. I want to say to you all, I'm very moved at the moment, so I'm going to drop a name. but I want to drop it for a reason. So for a number of years, 11 years, I was on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, and we did a lot of work on HIV/AIDS and vaccines. And I will tell you that I learned a lot during all of that. And this is the way the world works. So one of the things that I got to do was we went to Nairobi. We went to what was called a slum to understand why some of the prostitutes in this slum did not get AIDS. And it was a question because of the lives they were leading, you would think they would get AIDS. So I went as a part of a team to understand this question. And I just want to show you how ignorant I really am. So we go to do this, and it was a part of a whole bunch of stuff we were doing. But it was really looking at what is referred to as positive deviants. Positive deviants are people who survive even in hostile environments. And so the idea is that those positive deviants know themselves. They have more knowledge than you do as an outsider coming from Harvard Business School, understanding what their circumstances really are and how to solve their problems, if you will. So I was I had a partner who was supposed to be with me as we were in this slum. And my partner, at some point, I think we'd been together for most of the day, it was getting late. And she said to me, "I understand you're a business professor." And for whatever she didn't know what Harvard was or whatever, but I was a business professor. So she literally said to me, "How can I raise my rates from 15 cents to 25 cents? Because if I can get 10 more cents, I can send my daughter to secretarial school and she won't have to be a prostitute." Now, what you need to understand about this is I thought that I had been partnered with a nurse, because some of us were partnered with nurses and some of us were partnered with prostitutes. I was with the prostitute. I thought I'd been with the nurse all day, okay? So this is who you're getting ready to hear from. Somebody who does not know, does not understand really what's going on here. So at some point I thought, this is the prostitute. Now my first inclination was to say to her, "You know what, I'm not a marketing professor, I'm a leadership professor. You are describing a marketing problem," right? So, but I have to tell you, it just reminded me once again about how interconnected we all are, because later on, and this is going to get too personal, I have a rare autoimmune disease. And it turns out that the doctor who took care of me, and I would have died if he had not, was someone who actually indirectly, who was in Nairobi, who worked on HIV/AIDS and all of the infectious diseases you get when you have that disease. And so thanks to that person who was a part of Paul Farmer's group, he's the one who figured out what medication I needed to have to stay alive. So we are all deeply interconnected. And I like the word connect, and seeing what you're doing with what the challenge is. Very important that you're doing that work. And I always remember when I think am I getting a big head? You don't know. There's no difference actually between the prostitute and the nurse. There's no difference between me and the other. So I'm not implying, but I was completely, she taught me so many things that whole day and afterwards. And then it turns out it actually mattered to me because I got sick and I needed actually the same treatments she needed because I had the same kinds of infectious diseases that you get when your immune system dies. So we are all connected. I'm glad to see you here. Going to see you in other parts of the world, because the other thing I study is globalization. And actually that in some ways is my passion. And what I just described to you is why I became a business professor. I'm interested in economic development for even the most marginalized. That's what drives me, and it may not look like it all the time, but that's what I'm interested in. That's what got me interested in the questions I'm going to talk with you about, because that's the story of me. So I'm working on a book called Scaling Genius. The book is not done, so I have to name this and call it that because I'm working on it, and it has to eventually exist. And I'm actually going to take you back through a journey I've been on for about 20 years. Again, it was a question asked of me. Our dean at the time asked me, "Linda, are we developing leaders who know how to lead innovation?" And he asked me that in my role as the chair of the leadership initiative here at the school. And what I was supposed to be doing is figuring out, what do you need to know for the future? And I said to the dean, of course we are. We have some of the world experts on leadership, not me being one of them. I wasn't thinking of me. We have some of the world experts on innovation. So of course we're preparing them. But when I went to the library, which is where a professor goes when she wants to know something, I realized that really there wasn't very much research that looked at the link between leadership and innovation. There's lots of research on innovation and lots of research on leadership, but not much that looks at the link between the two. And so I had to go back to the dean and say, you know what, I'm not so sure. I thought the answer was yes, but let me do a little pilot study to find out. So lucky for me, because I'm so curious and so lucky, I met the man who was basically the chief technology officer of Pixar by accident. We had both been stood up by the same executive. So we were sitting on a bench and needed to talk with each other. He talked with me. And I'm like, he said, would you like to come over and see Pixar? I'm thinking, oh yeah, trick question. Okay, like the prostitute, a little easier than the prostitute question. I said, sure, like when? You know, I can be back here tomorrow. What's the story? So anyway, had to come back to teach, but I went back, and he became my collaborator. So to this day, we do work together. And the first book we wrote, Collective Genius, he was a co-author of that book. He's not a co-author of Scaling Genius, but we're still deeply in communication and working on things together. So the first company that I spent a ton of time in to try to understand what the connection is between leadership and innovation was Pixar. And they are a special place for a lot of reasons. I am an ethnographer, so I use the methods of anthropology to do my work. And so that means I have to spend hundreds of hours, it used to be on the ground, with leaders who had built teams, organizations, or ecosystems that could innovate time and again. But then, you know, with COVID, I ended up learning how to do it on Zoom and Teams and Google Meet or whatever it might be. So I've been collecting data that way as well, just to be clear, but it's not natural for an anthropologist. So my work is that way, and I always do my work with at least one young person. And they're complete co-authors of my books, or our books. And so the last two have been Emily's. The first one had the nerve to get married, which was wonderful, and she became Emily True Love. So I think people bought the book because they wanted true love, right? So that was a good name. And the second one is also an Emily Tettert. So I have two ETs, very smart ETs. And I want to tell you that they have really been shaping this work, as are these other executives that I work with, one being Greg. It turns out the other one was the man who designed the Apple stores and the Tesla stores and the Virgin. So he was the Apple person, if you will. But those are not just the kinds of organizations that we studied, but we've hung together for a long time. One was a young person at IBM who's now a senior executive at Microsoft. But we have a team. So if I say I, it's because it's what I believe and they don't agree with me. And that happens all the time. And I'll say we otherwise. So what we began to do about 7 years ago is we began to study also digital transformation, because it was very clear that digital tools and data are enablers of agility and innovation. So the question is, again, what do exceptional leaders of innovation do? That is, people who build teams, organizations, or ecosystems that can routinely innovate. Routinely innovate is really an important piece of the puzzle. So one of the leaders that I had the privilege of studying in his organization was Dr. Rakesh Suri. He was the CEO of Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi. He's now stepped down. I do the research longitudinally, usually for at least 5 years, because it takes that long to really change or transform a culture, I find. Not always, but usually. So basically, when I was looking at Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, the question was, they were wanting to be a very innovative organization. They were doing digital. They have been declared as one of the smartest healthcare organizations in the world. For instance, they had 400 nurses who were doing A/B experiments all the time to figure out how they could innovate on behalf of their customers. So this is what we were studying. So I called him in early 2020 because we weren't going to be able to meet, we discovered, so how are we going to collect our data? So we began to think about that a bit, and somewhere in the conversation he said to me, Linda, I feel like I'm leading through a fog. What does it mean to lead when you can't see, when you have no vision? And fundamentally, I think we often now are leading through a fog, where we can't see, where we have no vision, because the speed and the uncertainty and the complexity of what we have to deal with. So this is a man who is a pioneer in robotic cardiac surgery, very much on the cutting edge of everything he does, and he's not comfortable, if you will, with not being able to see when you have no vision. So his first thought, he said, was his job was to take charge and steer the ship. That's what I have to do, it's a crisis. He soon realized that was exactly the wrong thing to do. Exactly the wrong thing to do. He said, Linda, what I need to figure out is how to hyper-empower my people. Hyper-empower them. Because I have to convince them there is nothing called business as usual. That doesn't exist. There's no business as usual. Instead, we all need to become agile, innovative problem solvers. That's what we have to do because there's no business as usual. And he said, this is not natural for me because I am a surgeon and I'm married to a Harvard Medical School professor and a physician and all that, so I know they don't like this. They like to see, right? They're not used to that. But he said, what you have to understand, the way I was trained, when I see blood, I stick my finger in it and stop the bleeding. This idea that I'm hyper-empowering, not natural, not what I think about, but I need to do it. So he got a sparring partner to help him, to give him feedback along the way, which is something I see with these leaders. And he also said to his senior team, we need to be a sacred space. This is going to be sacred space, because I can't do this alone. We all need to be able to do it together. Now, what he was talking about is what actually I've been studying with my colleagues for 20 years. How do you convince people there's nothing called business as usual, and we all need to be agile, innovative problem solvers? We only can do that by hyper-empowering people. So we've studied leaders in a range of different countries, and not all countries. I don't think we've covered all continents. Maybe we've gotten pretty close, and a range of different industries. I'm also spending a ton of time on government right now because government is an important player in these ecosystems that need to be built. And what we see differences we see differences in how these leaders lead. Those differences reflect their own individual leadership styles and also their, I think, national culture, because we have different expectations of leaders in different countries. But we see real commonality in what they do and why. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. The first thing is, what I learned, which was shocking to me, was that leading innovation is not the same as leading change. But what I'm going to be describing to you are leaders who are doing both because they're transforming their organizations. That's what our second book is about. How do you do innovation at scale with speed? So the thing is that what these leaders do is they have a very simple definition of what innovation is. And innovation is anything that is new and useful to the organization. It can be incremental, it can be breakthrough. All of the leaders that I've studied have done breakthrough innovation, but they don't define it that way. It can be a product, a service, a business model, a way of organizing, a way of cutting costs right now. It's just a way of doing problem solving, fundamentally, where you come up with more innovative, new and useful ideas. So because they believe that everyone in the organization needs to be both a value creator and a game changer. Everybody in the organization, the janitor in the hospital, who's called a caregiver, because everybody in the hospital is a caregiver in their opinion, everybody has to be able to identify and close performance gaps, identify and close opportunity gaps. Gaps between where you should be and gaps between where you are now and where you should be, gaps between where you are now and where you could be. So because they focus on this, and you may need to innovate for both. I want to be clear, one's not execution and one's innovation. You may need to innovate to actually close a performance gap. Right? But for sure, you need to innovate to close an opportunity gap. So what you see is over time, these organizations have more people, or these teams, because we didn't only study CEOs, we are studying middle managers. We're not necessarily, most of the middle managers, I'll talk about one of them, they're pretty middle in big organizations. And some of them, we don't have people, I think they're at least middle managers. We don't have people who are really towards the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, that we've been studying in depth. Supervisors, et cetera, although we see them because we're studying the whole organization and what these leaders are doing. But what we see is that they have more people in one. And I will tell you that in my other research, which is on how leaders learn to lead, particularly stars, what we're seeing is if you can't be in box one, you're no longer going to be seen as a high potential in your organization because the organization needs you to be always thinking about coulds and not just shoulds. So the next thing I just want to tell you is there are these three muscles that get built in these organizations. Because what these leaders understand is that it's not about, when you're leading innovation, unlike leading change, it's not about having a vision and getting people to follow you to the future. That's change. And actually, everybody that we studied was a visionary, big time. They all are. Leading innovation is about really creating an environment in which people are willing and able to co-create the future with you, not follow you to the future. And that's a very different mindset and a different way of doing things, this hyper-empowerment kind of idea. And those organizations have three muscles. The first is creative abrasion, and that is creating a marketplace, the ability or the capability to create a marketplace of ideas through debate and discourse. So it's a marketplace of ideas. So you might start out brainstorming, but eventually you have to rub the ideas against each other if you want to get a robust pipeline of ideas to actually experiment and learn on. So once you do creative abrasion, and this is one of the ones where another piece of that research I was doing, I had the absolute privilege, surprise of spending a day with Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu as they talked to children who had AIDS, and compared it to when they had when he had tuberculosis, when that was the AIDS of his time, and what would happen to you. So again, someone very visionary, and what did President Mandela said, one of the most important roles of the leader is to make sure the minority voice is heard. You must know what everybody thinks. Doesn't mean you do what they think, but you must know what they think, because they're often warning you of a risk that needs to be mitigated. So you got to get it all out. You got to have that abrasion, not necessarily comfortable. The second thing you do is you get your robust pipeline, then you have to test and experiment with those ideas. And this is that whole process that you all are getting exposed to. You know, it's very common to you all, design thinking, agility, lean startup, all of those methods to actually transact with your, quote, customer and iterate as quickly as you can, learn as efficiently as you can to come up with a solution, because you cannot plan your way to an innovation. You can only act your way to an innovation. So that's the second capability. The third really cuts across the other two, and creative resolution is about how you make decisions. So if you want to come up with an innovative solution, it tends to be more both and in the Roger Martin kind of way, for those of you who follow opposable thinking. And the only way you get that, and why this is important, is if you take advantage of the diversity of thought that comes up in creative abrasion, because you rarely get innovation without diversity of thought and conflict that comes with that. Or you also, or you can take advantage of the learning that comes from those experiments. And so what creative resolution is do you make decisions that allow you to take advantage of the diversity of thought and the learning? So what you see in these organizations is people don't compromise, they don't go along to get along, because we know that rarely leads to an innovative solution. Also, they don't let one group dominate. They don't let the bosses dominate, and they don't let the experts dominate. And Steve Jobs was deeply concerned about the experts dominating, because they're very tied to the status quo. So you always want to have someone in that mix who has the beginner's eye, who does not actually know. So Dr. Suri said when they put their team together to deal with COVID, he said, we need someone who's never seen an epidemic before. We've seen it all. Ebola, SARS. We think we know. This is different. We need somebody who will ask the so-called stupid question, so we will look at our first assumptions. Now, it's not easy to get a person to speak up amongst experts or for other people to hear that person, so he saw that as his job. In a sense, that was the minority voice in a lot of the teams and what they were doing. So these are the three capabilities, and I'm going to try to make them less abstract. So this is Kathy Fish. Because I take so long to do my research, she recently retired, but she was the head of R&D. But we're still following. We're still there. We want to see what happens next. That's where you can see if things have been institutionalized, if you will. But basically, she said, I don't know if you all would know this or remember, but Procter & Gamble ended up with an activist on their board. Generally, if you get an activist, not good. Okay, you're not growing at the rate that the market wants. So what actually happened with her is she said, here I am responsible, quote, for innovation. But one of the ways we connected is she had read something that I had written about what these leaders do is have a very democratic notion of innovation. Everybody is supposed to innovate, not just, and she said, you know what, that's what needs to happen here. Everybody's looking to R&D to innovate. But no, we actually need to democratize innovation. We don't have enough people in box 1. We have everybody in box 4. Everybody knows how to be a value creator, but that does not grow the top line the way you need it to grow. We actually need to be bolder. So we're going to innovate on how we innovate. And what she said first was we're going to do only irresistibly superior products. And actually she moved from products and said it's the whole experience. Because really what was happening to them is competitors weren't competing head-to-head necessarily for the quality of the product. They were competing relative to the experience. It was more convenient to buy their product or whatever it might be. So we have to think about creating an emotional connection with our customers that is really so irresistible they will not leave us. And the only way we can do that is, yeah, R&D needs to do its part, but everybody else needs to be doing innovation as well. So they put in place Lean Startup, which is one of the things almost every large company I see that decides they want to be more innovative, they start with creative agility. Let's do our work differently. So this is from Lean Startup, which is basically, you know, the book on that, et cetera. And the whole idea is you're going to transact with the customer. This is a very fast learning iteration, very difficult for big companies to learn. But what I really want to focus on is the two other pieces. One is, she said, we have to fall in love with the problem of the consumer. Fall in love, not the solutions we have. And you can only imagine how many solutions they have at Procter & Gamble, right? 1,000,001 solutions that they're trying to sell to people. No, we got to fall in love, and this is the end consumer, because they sell to the Walmarts and the CVSs, right? The scale that was built for that. But now we need to be, what I see is almost all B2B businesses need to become B2B2C. You must actually go to the end consumer and understand that experience and try to transact, which is difficult because your customer may not be so happy about some of this. The other thing they realized is they had to change their leadership. So even the C-suite ended up with a coach. And the coach counted how many times did the leaders ask a question and how many times did the leader make a statement. And then they also, after looking at that, and you all know what that would have looked like, and what ended up happening is they came up with a script. So they had to say, what have you learned? How have you learned it? What else do you need to learn? How can I help? They just literally had to write a script to force themselves to get new habits about how they behave when people were presenting, quote, new ideas, new innovations to them. Now, one of the fun ones that I encourage you to look up is P&G has a whole product line called EC30 now. It had a different name, but it's changed. You can only buy it online. You buy it by subscription. They've taken all of the water out of all of their soap. So all the soap you need, from washing your face to doing your laundry, is in that little box. So this is the way, and this came in part, and I'll talk more about the other willing, what makes you willing, purpose. Turns out there was a whole group of people there who really are concerned about sustainability. And so if the purpose is about sustainability, boy, I want to innovate on that. I want to do the hard work necessary to get this done. And so they're still experimenting, but I encourage you to look it up. Now, I got to be careful with my time, and I'm going to come to the next one. And let me go back. We have someone here who's from the Philippines. There she is. She has to give a commencement speech. She's in a panic state, right? You're going to write it and send it to me. So what I will tell you is Michael is from the Philippines. Okay, here's your buddy. He just gave a commencement speech last week, and it was really, really good. But anyway, what I will tell you, Michael, how many of you have the Pfizer vaccine in your body right now? Okay, I have Moderna, and he has forgiven me, okay? He told me, take whatever they give you, Linda, when you go to the hospital. So Michael is the reason, Michael and his team, this is the man whose team ran the trials in 266 days and brought us all hope. Now, when I started studying Michael, looking at digital transformation, we didn't know about COVID at all, right? But he on his own, he had a vision. He was supposed to bring technology to this group. So this is his vision. It's changed dramatically, but it was a patients-first digital and physical supply chain. And they were going to put in place the technology and the data so that they could move from hindsight to insight to foresight. That was his dream. This is what we're going to do. Michael soon discovered, and he thought this would take 3 years, okay? Naive. Michael soon discovered that the technology part of digital transformation is not the hard part. It's actually getting people to adopt, to use the technology and use the data. So once again, the people are the problem, right? We are always the problem. So he discovered that he had to go back and make people feel willing to innovate. And the first thing he found is if you're in supply chain, you don't think you're the innovator. The scientists who are coming up with the drugs are the innovators. You're the executor. And Michael was like, if they're going to do breakthrough medicines, then we need to be breakthrough in how we do supply chain and how we do these trials. So we need to go down this path. So it took him about 2 years to convince the team that they, in fact, needed to be innovators. And the way he did that, and what makes people willing, is that they have a sense of purpose. So I'm not so surprised there are all these books about purpose right now, because we found that if you don't have a sense of purpose, people aren't going to innovate. And there are 2 reasons why. One, it's not worth it. Why should I kill myself, take career risks, et cetera, to solve something that's not so, who cares? And also, if I don't feel part of a community, then I don't feel like I can take the risks. I can't afford it. So if you don't have that sense of purpose, who we are, who we serve, this really is the glue that lets us all begin to work together. Now, these other qualities I'm going to describe to you really quickly, and I got to be careful about the time. How many more minutes do I have? I don't when we started. It doesn't count for me. 10, okay. All right. So I'm going to show you this really fast. So what I want to show you, I shouldn't have told you about I should have told you about her because she means a lot to me, the prostitute who was in. She really, who made me realize, do not get a big head. You don't know what you're up to. You have no idea how blessed your life is. So one of the things that I want to say is, so this is a way, I mostly use qualitative methods, but we actually have a measure to measure culture and capabilities. And what you see here is Michael started with purpose, and so green is good. So green is really good. And orange is not so good. So this is about as good as it gets for a leadership team. And what I need to tell you about his leadership team is Michael decided, you know what, even though Pfizer's pretty siloed, we can't afford to be siloed if we're going to do these trials properly. So he went to all of his peers. This was on his own. He went to his peers. He's a middle manager, very middle manager, and said, I would like to have one of your high potentials attend my leadership team meetings. Is that okay? No one said no, because it's like, what's this? Okay, fine. Now, it turns out his leadership team then ends up being about 16 people, which is huge, but people from a whole bunch of different parts of Pfizer. Now, his team was upset about this because they didn't really want to air their dirty laundry in front of, all these other people that they don't even know or trust. But they begin to work together, and you see how it turns out. If you look at the other side, that's his organization. And it's a global organization, and it's hard to build culture throughout and across, right? So we're seeing this, and they're not good at creative abrasion nor at creative resolution. So let me just dig deeply into one of these, and then I want to move forward. I don't mean for you to, I think it's important to see these things in an integrated fashion as opposed to a checklist. But what I want you to look at, we're not surprised if you look at creative agility that they're not good at experimentation. It's deeply regulated business. Safety and quality, real important, right? But they're getting better at it. I started studying them in 2016. This is 2017. So if you look at creative resolution, actually, I don't want to go there. Let's look at creative abrasion. They have more diversity of thought. When Michael came in, and many of you may find this, most people had been there, everybody had been there longer than him because he was new. And there were people there who probably wanted the job and thought, who are you coming in to do this? Because he came from a biotech company. But one of the things that happened, so he said they had many of the people in his organization had been there 25 years. People don't leave Pfizer. They don't leave the supply chain. They were there. He began to introduce more digital talent. So he began to bring in some new people. So we see some diversity of thought. And they're opening up other offices globally because they need to be more global. So what's happening there is they have more diversity. Marketplace, they now have cross-functional teams. For whatever reason, they call them tetrads, a hard word in some ways, but they like words like that, right? The tetrads are where these cross-functional teams meet. But guess what? They're really bad at conflict and debate. And why are they really bad at conflict and debate? Because they're polite. This is their report. I'm only reporting things I'm allowed to. We're very polite people. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And they deeply respect expertise. So even though it's a cross-functional team, if it's Linda, it looks like it's a problem that's going to fall more on Linda than me, I kind of let Linda do it. Or if I'm really uncomfortable with what Linda wants to do, I escalate it. We don't make a decision. We escalate it back up. So they escalate it to senior management. So right locus means the right people aren't in the room to make the decision, and it's slowed down because they have these escalation things going. And senior management's saying to me, Michael's saying, I've empowered them, but they refuse to be empowered. Right? These middle managers, they're refusing to be empowered. So we have no choice but to make the decision, right? So this is what you see. And it's not integrated decision making because fundamentally the senior people make the decision because the decision has to be made. They're not actually taking advantage of the diversity of thought. So that pattern is what they're doing. Now what ended up happening, and I'm just going to take you to the learning, this thinking piece. What ended up happening was the middle managers were disgusted. They had all of these projects that they referred to as walking zombies. Things that somebody should have killed, but nobody would, okay? So they decided they would take matters into their own hands. So they said to Michael and the senior team, can we help us get better at creative abrasion? And so what they did is they developed some rules that were very consistent with what we saw in our research, and that is, no matter what your opinion, you always had to say what your evidence was. Now, over time, they actually have more data and all of that. They do, because they're putting in place this stuff and they're using it. But you could say, and I want to tell you, it's data informed, not data driven. Very important that it's being informed by the data, not driven by the data, even though that language is used by so many companies. But what you had to say was, I believe this is what we should do, and my gut tells me it's the right thing to do, and I've been doing this for 15 years. And okay, well, but then you can question and say, because you have to say what your evidence is. so then someone can say to you, well, how do we know that your gut is relevant for what we're doing right now? Just like Dr. Suri told me, COVID is not operating the way it should, which is why we need to think differently. He told me back in February 2020, there are 7 variants, right? I'm thinking, so when I hear about all these variants, I knew variants were coming. I didn't realize really what it meant. But he said, Linda, it's weird. So anyhow, very technical term, but what I want to say is they began to say, okay, well, boss, I realize, or you have all that tenure, but, is there some data we should be collecting or what should happen? So you were allowed to ask questions of anybody. Then the other piece of it was, even though you might agree with the solution that has been proposed, you think it's the right way, you were supposed to be thinking holistically, which meant you're supposed to think about the whole enterprise. So you could say, I get why we want to go this way, but my function can't deliver that. Can we spend some time now talking about helping my function get ready so I can do what we all need to do? So this whole process, and they had something called the Straight Talk coin, and if you put the coin down, it's a kind of an English notion probably, or American notion, not English. US, I better be careful, because Michael, he became a Canadian, I will tell you, so I got to be careful. But what they ended up coming up with is that you could put this coin down, everybody had one coin in their pocket, and if you put that coin down, it meant, are we talking about what the patient needs us to talk about? Always when you put the coin down, it's about purpose. And if people would say, are we doing what we need to do? And that was to inspire people to sort of speak up a little more and say, we need to kill that because fundamentally we need the resource for this other thing that really might work better. So they practiced this, and so lucky for all of us, and they all feel this strongly, if they had not practiced this, they would not have been able to run those trials. In particular, creative abrasion. So you see the improvement, right? Fortunately for us, because that is what allowed them to be agile, that they actually worked on changing their culture and their capabilities. It is harder to change capabilities than culture. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole last story, except to remind us, and this is what we're talking about in Scaling Genius, is that, so if you think about Michael's being that white dot and his group as being the circle, and you all maybe learned about ambidexterity, one of the things we all know is Pfizer did not have the vaccine, right? Michael's team had to work with a German biotech company. So you have to be collaborative ready, be able to bridge across, to work with partners, because you don't have all the talent and tools inside anymore, particularly if you want to work at speed. The other side of that is he had to work with his vendors, the suppliers, right? And those vendors had become partners. I didn't tell you that part of the story. They changed those, and they built a social fabric. Because collaboration, experimentation and learning can only happen if there's a social fabric there to support that work. That's not about contracting. That's about actually trusting, having a sense of mutual influence, mutual respect, mutual expectations. So they had built that, and that's the other piece of it that's really, really critical. I just want to tell you one last person really quick, and then I'm going to stop there. What I've just been talking about is the architect role. How do you architect an organization? And also, how do you bridge? How do you work? And in all of these instances, it's not about formal authority. You cannot tell someone to innovate. Your formal authority does not matter. You can only invite them to innovate. And so you need to figure out, again, how do I influence them without formal authority, something that most managers hate, right? They like to have the form. It does not count, does not matter when you're trying to innovate. But what we want to do is take some questions from the audience now, but I want to actually just quickly show Ajay to you. And Ajay created this kind of value at MasterCard. And the only thing I want to point out about it, and how did this happen? But Ajay, the only reason I'm showing to him is the following. And this, I'll end here and take your questions. So Ajay just became the head of the World Bank. Do many of you know that, right? Right, so he's an unbelievably spectacular leader. I think we're blessed that he has become the head of the World Bank. The way that he started, the purpose he put in place for MasterCard to move ahead and become a tech company in payments was financial inclusion. He said, we're not going to compete directly with the Visas and whatever. We're going to go for financial inclusion. We're going to be the place that actually allows people, individuals, and small businesses, even in emerging markets, to have access to credit so that they can grow their wealth. Right? That's what he did. And this is in a company that, if you think about it, is made up of bankers. right? Who your new customer that you're diversifying into, these are people that you did not allow in the door. So when you read the story about how he did this, he first laid out the strategy. We're going to grow the business, 50% the core business, but this diversify, financial inclusion, and build new businesses, 50% there. So I want you to think about, I don't know if it's 50% time on shoulds and 50% time on coulds, but you can't completely move from this. And he built an organization that will take questions, I can talk to you about it, that fundamentally allowed people to move in a direction where when he started, he asked, what's going to be most important to our success in doing this? People said, innovation's 26 out of 27. In other words, this is not what we do. And moved that to be different. You do need to execute and innovate, but I just want to end with saying, for him, and this is the last thing, relentless focus on our customers, but what he really did is decency. I want to go back to treat people decently, give them access to opportunities. So his story, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, didn't mean to, is about that. So I want you to think about what's the purpose, what's the why, and that's why we're writing about that, because we need to be doing innovative problem solving to save the world's problems. And follow this man, read anything you can about it, and his heart and his soul, is probably the word I would actually use, is in exactly the right place to try to figure out how on earth do we create a world where there's access to opportunity. So thank you for joining us here at Harvard Business School. We're looking forward for you giving us access to opportunity in your settings, and more than happy to, as Patrick and I, we hang around for 25 years. Harvard Business School never goes away. Thank you. Questions? Is there any, do we have 5 minutes for questions or something like that? Okay, oh good, all right. So
for those who would like to ask questions, we have mic runners around the auditorium, because we want to make sure before you speak that you get on the mic so that people who are watching this on the stream can hear you. So please wait till the microphone gets to you. And we got one over there on the left with Christina.
Hello. I wouldn't have raised my hand if I knew there was a mic. Hello, my name's Johnny. I know that in order for us to have the creative abrasion and creative resolution, we have to have the shared purpose. But does it make sense to have one holistic shared purpose and we explain exactly what that looks like per department? Or does it make sense to have a holistic shared purpose and then give them the power, if you will, to figure out how that directly connects to their department so that they do have the willingness to connect in that sphere?
So the reason why purpose matters is from the reasons I quickly said, but it is what you get aligned around. Normally we think that we get aligned around vision, right? But this is about purpose instead. There's a lot more we could say about where it comes from and the why. So one of the challenges in a single organization, if you're at Pfizer, ideally you all have a sense of shared purpose because you do need to work across. When I begin to look at this bridging and creating these ecosystems, like we're studying a man who is trying to reform primary education in India. The government does not have the same shared purpose as the teachers, as the parents, as whatever. So what you're trying to figure out is you're trying to navigate or create a shared, what we call intention. Because we each have our purpose and priorities, right? They're different. But in fact, where is the common ground? So I would say in that instance, when we're looking at ecosystems, because the partners that you need are so different that you're trying to bridge with, and that's what they actually did at MasterCard to create this. They created an ecosystem, which we're not going to go through a whole lot. So they all do have their own purpose, and it's not a compromise. You're figuring out why on earth, why are we together? What's our common identity? So that's the question you want answered. And presumably in one organization, ideally, you end up having, Michael could sell patients first to others at Pfizer. It's not that they didn't care about patients, but they had lost touch with them in a part. Again, they're B2B in some ways, but now they spent time meeting with, they went to, as they developed their shared purpose, the best way to do it, they actually went to visit patients in their homes to understand what it really felt like to be in a trial. Now, it turns out that when COVID happened, people couldn't get to the hospital, so they actually had already built some relationships in communities and with people in their homes so they could right now they're dealing with Ukraine and Russia, war situations, right? So all of that understanding came from cross-functional teams spending time with patients in their homes and deeply We call it customer intimacy, deeply understanding the pain points and desires of those customers to get at the why. So it is tricky. I mean, but I would say in your company, if you're talking about it across your company, Michael's, the people who are on his leadership team, they did develop that patients first sense because they worked with them so much, right? So, yeah. But sometimes it's more shared intention where we overlap than it is shared purpose.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Right here? Oh.
Which I'll read so the people online can
Okay.
hear. The others on my team have more seniority than me, and I'm worried about asserting my authority. Any advice on navigating those team dynamics?
Well, when it comes to innovation, your authority doesn't matter. This is very hard to accept, right? You cannot tell people, I don't care how senior you are, you will innovate. It's like, yeah, right, okay. All right. They do that about everything anyway. But anyhow, but particularly when it comes to this. So the question was, how do I assert, what was the second part of it? Okay.
It reappeared.
Any advice on navigating? So basically, one of the challenges you have when people are more senior than you, like Michael, as I said, most of them were 25, they had more tenure and knew their jobs much better. I think what you need to think about is what really is my role? What am I really supposed to be doing for my team? And why was I selected to be the person who leads this team? Because if you're a high potential by definition, you're always going to have people who have more tenure underneath you because you're moving faster. So the question is, it's not about you coming up with the answer. How do you create an environment and a culture where people are willing to share what they know and you share what you know and facilitate a discussion and things that really allow you to collectively get this done? So the big reason that one of the problems for people who are more junior, I don't know where you are in your career, is that we think we're supposed to have the answers, and so we kind of hide it. Dr. Suri said to the hospital, I'm scared, but I trust you. That's fundamentally the truth. He did not know, right? And that's why the sacred space. So figure out who's on the team, what they have to offer, and what they need from you to do their best work. That's easier said than done, I know. So I apologize. Next question? Yes. I don't know where. You all have to tell me where they are. Why don't you stand up?
Hi.
Or okay.
Hi, and thank you
Hi.
so much for the wonderful presentation. I'm currently working at Vanguard, so it's the
Yep.
world's second largest asset manager, and it's the extreme opposite of an innovative organization.
Aha.
So it's the most comfortable, like
Yeah,
everyone's
and
just
Bryn Mawr, right?
very resistant to change.
Okay.
But I recently became a leader, so I'm going to have a team of contractors. And I guess my question is two parts. One is, how can I do as much as I can to, fight back against that culture of complacency that's really pervasive throughout the organization? It's just so hard to change anything. I've tried. But, and then how can I get my contractors to buy into this and feel empowered and contribute as much as they possibly can?
Okay, so the contractors, you mean this is outsourcing?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so I just wanted to make sure I understood what you mean by contractor. So because I was on the board of State Street for 13 years, I know Vanguard, okay, because we studied we looked at what you did, right, as an asset manager. So, I mean, inherently, because they're regulated businesses, they will potentially be somewhat more conservative in what they do. Complacent is a different word than conservative because of the risk-taking, and we all see how we don't benefit when risks aren't managed properly by our financial institutions, right? So there's a real reason why we develop the cultures we develop. There does need to be the risk mitigation that you're always thinking about as you try to innovate. So I will tell you, so the first thing I would say is when you're dealing with outsourcers, one of the companies that I dealt with did have a lot of outsourcing. Actually, Michael, they even had a lot of outsourcing. He brought more of it in over time, but this is where shared intention comes in. So the one leader that I studied that was doing this a whole lot, one of the things he wanted everybody to understand, if we don't want our contracts to be squeezed, our margins to be squeezed, or for us to be replaced by another group, then what we need to do is we need to deliver on those coulds. There's got to be something special, right? So I said to show the shoulds and the coulds. There's three advantages that companies get or leaders get when you tell people to focus on shoulds and coulds. First off, make sure you get the shoulds done. But you do not get a sense of customer ownership or stickiness unless you go beyond the should. So even if you have to kill yourself to deliver on the contract, those outsourcers, right? unless they give you something special, you're not going to stay with them. You're going to go to some. You're not going to be loyal to them. When you actually create a situation in which they're giving more than they should, then their jobs are more secure. So the one company that when I was looking at this, what he told them basically was you must always go beyond the contract. Because only by going beyond the contract will Vanguard stay with you. So let me help you go beyond the contract. Now, the person, and so how do we do that? Well, you have to educate them about what Vanguard really needs so that they can go beyond the contract. If you treat them as widgets, or whatever, they don't know your business. So what this leader did is he actually taught the outsourcers the business. They began to come up with literally $15 million ideas for how to improve the business because he included them. So you actually need to treat them not like they're outsourced people, but that they're part of the story, the purpose that you're trying to deliver with customers, and the alignment is around them being secure because they're doing more. And then you need to keep your end of the bargain when you sell them up, because managing up is a large part of this, is these people are giving us more than the others would. So I think that that's the way you find the common ground, security, right? And I tell you that it worked. And it may sound, and it was because you made them not vendors, but partners in the business and understood that they needed security. I don't know what else they need. You know better. I don't know them. But but really stepping into their shoes and saying, how can I help you have what you want? And I get what I want. Okay, this is how we do it. Does that help at all? Okay. Yep.
Awesome. I think we're out of time.
Okay.
But join me in thanking Linda, please, everybody. I have a gift for Linda over here, which I won't present on the stage, but you were asking about a T-shirt. It has this collector's item T-shirt included in the bag.
Oh, okay.
So
let's see if he was polite and gave me a smaller size. But I don't
outsource
think so.
those.
Look at this. Take responsibility when you're the leader.
I'm a believer in pushing decision-making down the organization. So a few comments really quickly on a few things. One thing that she mentioned was her collaborator, Emily Truelove. I sat in on a class with a professor named Mike Tushman, who I think is teaching one of the cases today. Am I right about that? Yes. And a woman was sitting next to me. I didn't realize she was faculty. It was Emily Truelove. And all I could think of when she told me her name is she sounds like a character in a James Bond movie.
I know.
The second thing I was going to mention is that I just got back from an 11-day trip overseas to Nairobi and to Dubai. And Linda and I never see each other on campus. And we got to have breakfast in Dubai together. So it was kind of nice because she was there at the same time
Monday,
as me.
Monday, I think, was it?
Pardon me?
Was it Monday that we had breakfast?
I've lost track.
I don't know.
It might have been yesterday. I don't know.
Right, yes, right.
And in that, I gave a few presentations there, and one thing that I talked about was the mission of the Harvard Business School is to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. And I made the comment that every problem in the world is, for the most part, solvable with good and ethical leadership. And there's a huge shortage of that. If there's anything we're really in short supply of, it's that. And so we got a short supply of it in politics, we got a short supply of it in business, we got a short supply of it in every other kind of sector you can think of. So to the extent that you all become a part of helping solve that problem, that will be great. And my last thing I will say is, based on one of the questions we had, share a little, and I've told this story before in this venue, so if you've heard it before, forgive me, but I went into the military right out of undergrad, and I was an officer. And one thing that's unusual about the military, certainly in the United States, is that as the most junior officer, you were more senior than the most senior enlisted person. Right. So I stepped into a role where I had people who had immense more experience than I did, knew more than I would ever know. And my boss, when I reported for duty as a young second lieutenant, 22 years old, told me something I'll never forget. And it's really applicable in the business world as well. And I fail at it sometimes. I'll pull rank every now and then. But he said to me, Lieutenant Mullane, the military is unique in that it's the only sort of organization in the world where you literally wear your rank on your shoulder. He says, people know you're in charge. Don't tell them you're in charge, because if you tell them you're in charge, you lose power that you'll need. And I thought that was excellent advice. I think it's excellent advice in the private sector as well. So with that, thank you, Linda, very much again. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. So what's next is we're going to leave this venue, go over to Aldrich Hall, which is across the quad here, where the classrooms are for the case studies. There's refreshments on the way. For those who are online, they're going, Lauren, to the main stage. Is that what I understand? To the main stage for activities there. And then you'll get further instructions from that point. I think lunch is going to be after the case studies, I believe. But thank you so much for coming. Great to see all you, and I'll see you through the day. Thank you a million.